Hi, I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have Callan's Mock Draft 2.0 and Eating W's overall final mock draft before the actual real thing on Thursday, April 27th.
Yep.
You excited for the final draft, Callan?
I'm excited for it. I've been waiting to do this for a while. Then we had a little bit of a delay on this, so I've been chomping at the bit for this final mock draft.
Here we are, fighting through technical difficulties and getting this one last episode out before the draft. But I'm going to make you chomp just a little longer because before we jump into Callan's mock draft, we have a few bits of news, starting off with a big extension. The Eagles signed quarterback Jalen Hurts to a 5-year, $255 million extension, making him the highest paid quarterback in the NFL right now. Which, after the stats he put up last year, he deserves it. But if I'm an Eagles fan, I'm a little nervous because that's a lot of money for only one real year of production.
Yeah, that is true. He did have quite the year, though. And what's funny is that he's the one who gets the extension and not Lamar Jackson. So you have to imagine, would Lamar Jackson's contract extend or beat this number?
Yeah, I can't imagine it beats it, but we'll see if Jalen Hurts lives up to it, because then that's kind of going to affect Lamar, like you said. And then next up, we got a trade with the Los Angeles Rams sending wide receiver Allen Robinson to Pittsburgh and giving Kenny Pickett a nice little safety blanket in a somewhat confusing trade in my eyes. So the Rams send both Allen Robinson and their 7th round pick this year to the Steelers, and in return only get the Steelers' 7th round pick, which is only about 17 picks moved up for the Rams. But then the real kicker here is the Rams are paying 2/3 of Allen Robinson's contract this year. So the Rams are taking a dead cap hit and losing a pretty good receiver for 17 picks in the 7th round.
In the 7th round.
A little confusing to me, but good for the Steelers, I guess.
I hope that guy ends up being a superstar. Because we can look back and be like, see, that 7th round pick, it really mattered that they were moved up 17 spots.
That would actually be pretty funny if that pick ended up being really good.
We'll have to see when we come back to it next week.
A very nice piece for Kenny Pickett in that young Pittsburgh offense. A good mentor type
Yes,
guy.
And he replaces Chase Claypool too, and especially with the veteran leadership in that wide receiver room now.
Certainly. And then finally, 5 NFL players are suspended for violating the NFL gambling policy, just happening today when we're recording on Friday the 21st. But two Lions players and 1 Commanders player, including Lions wide receiver Quintez Cephus, will be suspended indefinitely for at least 1 year. And then also 2 more Lions players, including Lions wide receiver Jameson Williams, will be suspended for 6 games next season. So that poor guy just cannot hit the field no matter what he does.
He cannot get to the field. It's really too bad because he's quite the talent. It'll be interesting to see how he does perform when he does finally come back 6 games in. But still, this is quite the hit to his young career.
Yep, so all 3 of the first players, including Quintez Cephus, have already been released by their teams, the 2 Detroit and 1 Commander, respectively. And then the reason the shorter suspension for Jameson Williams and the other line is because they did not actually violate by betting on NFL or any sort of football games. The only thing they violated was betting in a team facility. So that's why they got the 6 game instead of the 1 year, just to kind of clear that up.
It was probably in a March Madness tournament bracket.
I'd imagine it was probably
got in trouble for the office pool.
It was probably something with that. Trouble in the office pool. Come on, Detroit. Stop running the illegal office pools. The underground March Madness tournament. But that is all we have for news to start off this episode. So now it is finally time. Callan, start off your mock draft 2.0.
So with this mock draft, it starts out roughly the same, with the first overall pick of the Carolina Panthers going with Anthony Richardson. And I still believe in the story that Carolina likes his athleticism and reminds them of Cam Newton. And the recent news of C.J. Stroud's very low, not the IQ score, the
S2.
Oh gosh, I
just
can't
sent
remember.
it to you earlier.
It's like the Wonderlic, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's not the cognitive score.
The cognitive score.
Test,
it was a very low score. So
18%.
I believe that takes a hit to C.J. Stroud, and then like I said, I believe that they like Anthony Richardson's raw ability, and they can build around that.
Again, just like last time when I first saw this pick, I was really questioning it. But I mean, when you factor in Bryce Young's small stature, and then now you kind of look at C.J. Stroud dropping a sub 20% on his cognitive test when Bryce Young got a 98 and Will Levis got a 93, maybe Richardson does find his way in that top pick.
Yeah, it could be. And then moving on with the second overall pick, the Houston Texans select C.J. Stroud, the quarterback of Ohio State. And even though with the low score, he still is one of the most talented quarterback prospects to come out in recent years. And I believe that the Houston Texans select him and are able to build around him with that young team with veteran leadership all around on the offense and the defense.
Yeah, I don't weigh too much into the Wonderlic or the cognitive test for quarterbacks. I will admit that 18% is a very low score.
It doesn't look good.
But nevertheless, he's got the perfect build for the quarterback. He put up the stats in college, and he's probably the most accurate passer this year. I like that pick.
Yep, and moving on to the third overall pick, the Arizona Cardinals keep the pick and select edge out of Alabama, Will Anderson Jr. And I believe that they go with Will Anderson here, because they're going through a lot of turmoil this offseason, but both Zach Ertz and Kyler Murray recovering from torn ACLs, DeAndre Hopkins and Budda Baker now requesting trades. You had J.J. Watt retire. They lost Zach Allen. They need to build around that defense and build with a young star and a young great character, and that's Will Anderson this year. And he's probably the safest pick in this draft, and we'll see if he is. And
yeah, I got to imagine the Cardinals trade out of this. I mean, you just heard the list Callan rambled off right there. They have so many needs. Let somebody else move up to that third overall pick. Get some draft capital this year. Fill in some holes. But if they do pick here, I don't see him taking anyone but Will Anderson Jr. You got a lot of uncertainty. Take something that's not so uncertain.
I think I had Jalen Carter in my last draft, but he's too much of a risk. Arizona needs someone that's safe.
That's just one more question mark.
Yeah, they don't need to add any more question marks to this turmoil offseason. And moving on with the fourth overall pick, the Indianapolis Colts select Bryce Young, the quarterback out of Alabama. Now I switch it up here and go with Bryce Young because I'm starting to buy into your theory that Shane Steichen likes that Jalen Hurts style of quarterback, and especially after the big extension they just gave Hurts. I don't know. It's making me think that maybe, Steichen really was the mastermind behind all of that.
Yeah, Bryce Young doesn't have near the raw strength that Hurts does, but he does have that just uncanny pocket presence and the almost near magic-like ability to get out of sacks. So it is some similarities there.
Yep, and moving on, the Seattle Seahawks select the Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle out of Georgia, and this is more like the best player available. And the Seahawks benefit from a slight fall from Jalen Carter, who went 3 overall in my last draft, and I believe that they select him because they can kind of buy that baggage that comes with Jalen Carter. And even though it seems like it's getting cleared, it still is just a red flag. And the Seahawks kind of like collecting those bad boys, so we'll see how it goes in Seattle.
They do like taking swings, and it usually does work out for them. They're in a pretty good spot right now and have the 5th and 20th overall pick in this year's draft, so you can definitely take a risk there and replace Poona Ford with a really good player.
And with the 6th overall pick, the Detroit Lions select edge Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech. And I believe that they pair him with Aiden Hutchinson. Hopefully, the rumor was that Aiden Hutchinson is also going to be in trouble for the gambling ring. I don't know. That's just something I heard on Twitter. I don't know. There's no source behind it besides that, but that's the rumor on Twitter, and we'll see how that goes. But they definitely will need someone to rush the passer if Hayden Hutchinson gets suspended. And Tyree Wilson is one of the rawest prospects, but maybe has the highest ceiling in this draft.
Yeah, I don't trust the NFL rumor mill. We'll see if anything actually comes to fruition there, but I really like the Lions going edge in this draft, whether it's getting Will Anderson Jr. or Tyree Wilson, or maybe even if you don't get one of those guys, pick up another edge rusher in the first round at 18 when they pick again. But just give yourself an elite young pass rushing duo with Aiden Hutchinson and whoever they get. So I like that pick.
Yeah, hopefully he's there. And with the 7th overall pick, the Las Vegas Raiders select Devon Witherspoon, the cornerback out of Illinois. And this is still the same from my last draft. And I still believe that they're going to go with defensive backfield help for the Raiders, who really have needs everywhere. But I believe that this is one of the top prospects left and one of the best players available on defensive side for the Raiders to pick up.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of films on man corners this year because I know that's what the Vikings need right now. And Joey Porter Jr. is still kind of my draft crush for the Vikings and overall when it comes to that cornerback position. Devon Witherspoon puts up some nice tape and he's willing to come lay the boom, which you love to see.
Yeah, and he'll fit right in with the Raiders.
Exactly.
And with the 8th overall pick, the Atlanta Falcons select Paris Johnson Jr., the offensive lineman out of Ohio State. Now, they go with protecting the quarterback here and select one of the biggest offensive linemen available. Now, he is one of the top prospects left and one of the top offensive linemen. And originally I had Skoronski going first, but with Paris Johnson's size, that's just too much to overlook. And I believe that they go with the big offensive lineman out of Ohio State.
Yeah, I actually really like that because Atlanta is clearly trying to run a run-based offense, a run-heavy offense. And Paris Johnson is just a big mauler offensive tackle, while Skoronski is your much more technical guy. So I think Johnson does fit this offense better, definitely.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. And then with the 9th overall pick, the Chicago Bears select Peter Skoronski, the offensive lineman out of Northwestern. And the player that was just mentioned, Skoronski, goes to the Bears, who need that technical offensive lineman. They swung and missed on Tevin Jenkins and are looking to move him. So if they draft Skoronski, he can fit right in a plug-and-play system right there for the Bears, who take the best offensive lineman available left in the draft.
Yeah, definitely. They took that swing on Tevin Jenkins last year, and he was more similar to Paris Johnson Jr., that big mauler guy. So now they just play it safe and get a true technician.
And with the 10th overall pick, we have our first trade with the Philadelphia Eagles trading to the Minnesota Vikings, who move up from 23 to 10. And the Minnesota Vikings select quarterback Will Levis out of Kentucky. And I have seen this in other mock drafts where they have the Vikings moving up to select a quarterback. And the more I see it and the more I think about it, the more I believe it. They draft a quarterback here to sit behind Kirk Cousins, who was playing on his final year. They let Cousins walk, and they groom the heir apparent to the Kirk Cousins era.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I really like Will Levis. I'm going to open with that. Moving up 10 or 13 spots to 10 and picking quarterback is just too early for Will Levis. It kind of gives me deja vu of 2021 when I really liked Zach Wilson. I was watching his film, and when he was like a second round guy, I was like, I want the Vikings to get this guy. He's such a good quarterback for a second round. Then out of nowhere, he just started jumping up draft boards and ended up going second overall to the Jets in 2021. Yeah. And now everyone considers him a bust not because he actually didn't play well, it's just because he didn't live up to the hype of the second overall pick. I'm afraid that's going to happen to Will Levis if he gets taken too early because he's a project quarterback. So I'm afraid that the pressure is going to get to him, the hype's going to get to him if he gets taken way early in the top 10 like this. So I'd love if he became a Viking somehow. just not this way.
So to get the trade to go through, it costs they're obviously the 23rd overall pick, and then your first and third next year.
It's just too much to give up.
It was a lot to give up, but I wanted to take a swing after I saw that in a couple mock drafts.
If we get Levis at 23, or maybe move up to like 20 and get him, that's one thing. But 10's just too much.
And I thought with the Eagles, I thought that would just be too fitting.
Yeah, the damn Eagles.
Your old wide receiver buddies. So moving on with the 11th overall pick, the Tennessee Titans select Jackson Smith-Njigba, the wide receiver at Ohio State. And for what I've been hearing, Smith-Njigba is the top overall wide receiver in the draft. And not only does the media believe it, but so do GMs. And so he goes to a very wide receiver needy team who just lost Robert Woods and A.J. Brown last year. So he goes in and immediately becomes the number one in the Tennessee Titans offense, who has also been rumored and linked to Aaron Rodgers if the Jets deal falls through. So that would be interesting.
The NFL rumor mill stays strong. Interesting.
Yes, I've been following the rumor mill a lot with the draft coming up.
I totally agree that Jackson Smith-Njigba is the top receiver in this class. He's the top in my mind. But I like drafting for a fit. If Tennessee goes receiver, I personally want to see them go Quentin Johnson out of TCU. But nonetheless, I do like them taking receiver here at 11. It's definitely their biggest need.
Yeah, I thought so too. And with the 12th overall pick, the Houston Texans select with their second choice in the first round, Myles Murphy, the edge out of Clemson. And I believe that they need to pair someone up with, or not pair someone up. I don't think they have an edge rusher. Not really. So they need to build around someone. And this is a young, great prospect to build around. He's a known winner. He's been on a championship-winning team with Clemson, and that's what the Houston Texans need. They need that winning culture brought to them, and that's what this will bring in this selection.
Winning culture is definitely something they do not have right now. I personally think this is a little early for Myles Murphy, but like I just said, I do like picking for fit, and I think Myles Murphy is a great fit for that 3-4 Texans defense in general. So I like it.
Yep. And with the 13th overall pick, we have our second trade. We have the Green Bay Packers trading with the New York Jets, with Aaron Rodgers, and they just trade the first overall, their first round pick straight up. The 13th overall pick for Aaron Rodgers, just straight up. That's how this trade went through. So it's kind of a compromise. Green Bay wanted the first and the second. The Jets didn't want to give up 13, but this way, the Packers get that first round pick. And with that first of the first round picks, then
giving yourself some time.
Yeah, a little bit. They select Brian Branch, the safety out of Alabama, and this fills an immediate need from them. And Brian Branch can play the slot corner and the safety, and that's the way that the Packers defense plays. So he'll fill an immediate spot for them that was left by Adrian Amos, who seems to be leaving in free agency.
Yeah, definitely the most versatile defensive player in the draft. He's kind of that Jamal Williams style guy where you just throw him in and he's going to play football. He's going to go get the ball, whether he's got to go tackle the running back in the box or play a deep zone and watch the streaks as a safety. So I like that for the Packers because they're in this really untrodden for the past 3 decades transition territory where they're not a favorite by any means. So it's interesting to see what they're going to do, and I like this, just kind of rebuilding with a versatile guy.
Mm-hmm. And with the 14th overall pick, the New England Patriots select Lucas Van Ness, the edge rusher out of Iowa. And like I said in the last draft, this is a perfect fit for Bill Belichick's defense. He can play anywhere on the field defensively, obviously besides defensive backfield. But, give it a shot. We'll see how it goes. He's the type of player who would give it his all at the very least. So he'll fit perfectly in that blue-collar defense run by Bill Belichick, and I think this is one of the perfect picks for this draft overall.
Lucas Van Ness could be a deep zone safety, nice free safety.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course, Kurt Ferentz, Bill Belichick connection, like you mentioned last time. It makes a lot of sense. You get a really good player here. I like it.
Yep, and with the 15th overall pick, the Green Bay Packers select Broderick Jones, the offensive lineman out of Georgia. And I believe that they pick the heir apparent to David Bakhtiari here. And I have heard rumors that Bakhtiari's last season will be this year in Green Bay. So they need to groom someone to take over that left tackle spot. And why not take one of the best remaining offensive linemen available in this draft in Broderick Jones?
Yeah, I like it. Broderick Jones is just a really good player overall. I mean, he's not going to necessarily be just a running mauler guy. He's not going to be just a pass blocker, but he's just got good size and good versatility. Sorry about that quick break. We got attacked by the dog pound, but we are back at it, and we're going to keep rolling with the 16th overall pick.
Yep, we had to take a little halftime break and, let the dogs out. And with the 16th overall pick, the Washington Commanders select Osiris Torrance, the offensive guard out of Florida. And this is the guy I had him taken in my first draft, and I believe this is where they go. I've seen this a lot in other mock drafts where they have him go into the Commanders here. He'll replace Brandon Sheriff, who they lost in free agency last year, and he'll be a young offensive lineman to build around that new offensive line in Washington.
Yeah, I completely agree. This pick just makes way too much sense. The Washington offensive line was at its peak when they had a young, elite Brandon Sheriff at that right guard position. They're picking right in the middle of the first round. This is a perfect place to go guard. Go Osiris Torrance. Make the right pick.
Yep, if that's the guy they like, go up and get him. And with the 17th overall pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Christian Gonzalez, the defensive back out of Oregon. And I believe they go defensive back now here with Christian Gonzalez. They lost Cam Sutton in free agency, and even though they did sign Patrick Peterson, they'll need someone to groom to take over for the future.
Yeah, this is the steal of the draft so far in my eyes. I mean, Christian Gonzalez is top 10 talent. He's dropping here to 17. He's going to perfectly fit that Pittsburgh defense. Gets to learn under one of the best to ever do it in Pat Pete. Great pickup for the Steelers.
And with the 18th overall pick, the Detroit Lions select Dalton Kincaid, the tight end out of Utah. And this is a big receiving option for them, a big athletic tight end to come out of Utah. And even though he does have the back injury, he's as reported to recovered from it. He will be one of the top tight ends in this draft. He will replace Jamison Williams now, who they lost in the offensive weapon field. So he will be an immediate starter for them, especially after they lost TJ Hawkinson last year at the trade deadline.
Yeah, this just makes way too much sense for Detroit all of a sudden. Losing Jamison Williams for only 6 games, it's not really worth it to kind of panic and go pick wide receiver. But you already had a need at tight end, so why not get a perfect receiving tight end?
Exactly. And with the 19th overall pick, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Michael Mayer, the tight end out of Notre Dame. And I believe they go tight end here and go back-to-back tight end in this draft. And he's the top tight end left available after Dalton Kincaid. And he's also the top blocking tight end. And I believe that will be key for the new Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who will try to turn to a running team with Kyle Trask as their quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield.
Oh, right. They got Baker. I forgot about Baker already.
But yeah, I mean, Michael Mayer really reminds me of Cameron Brate, who they just lost this offseason, who was a really good tight end and really thrived in that Tampa Bay system. So, again, just makes way too much sense not to do.
Exactly. And with the 20th overall pick, the Seattle Seahawks select edge rusher Nolan Smith out of Georgia. And this is one of the top edge rushers left available. And he will fit right into that new Seattle defense with Jalen Carter being their first round selection. And he will team up then with Nolan Smith, who brings that winning culture that I talked about earlier to Seattle, who will try to build a young, new, aggressive defense to counter their new offense.
Yeah, keep the Georgia boys together. I really like it. Nolan Smith is an athletic freak, but he has his own little red flags, more on the field than off the field, just because sometimes those workout warriors at the combine don't really translate to really good players. But if you take 2 swings on the defensive line, you got to imagine at least one of them become a home run. So
right, yeah, 2 red flags for 2 different reasons.
Yeah,
on 2 different players. And with the 21st overall pick, sorry, I'm jumping the gun. The Los Angeles Chargers select Quentin Johnson, wide receiver at TCU. And I believe they go with the big-bodied wide receiver here, even though the rumor is that the only real first-round receiver is going to be Jackson Smith-Njigba. But I believe that is a lie. And I believe that there will be multiple wide receivers drafted in the first round because there's many wide receiver needy teams.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot more sense for the Chargers to go with a smaller, speedy guy to really stretch the field vertically with speed instead of size. But they've shown a track record of just not really caring about that logic and taking big-bodied wide receivers. So maybe they continue that logic.
I believe they continue to do that. And with the 22nd overall pick, the Baltimore Ravens select Zay Flowers, the wide receiver at Boston College. And this is starting to be the fall for Jordan Addison, who was thought to be one of the top wide receivers available, but he continues to fall here, and Zay Flowers gets picked. And he has been to multiple visits to Baltimore. He's a big fan of Odell Beckham, and I believe that they picked Zay Flowers here to groom under Odell Beckham to be their next 1-2 punch.
Yeah, aside from the size, he kind of reminds me of Odell Beckham Jr., so it'd be really cool to be able to get a mentor like that, especially for a young player like Zay Flowers.
And with the 23rd overall pick, the Philadelphia Eagles from the Minnesota Vikings select Bijan Robinson, the running back out of Texas. And I had him going to the Eagles in my first draft at 10, and he falls all the way down here to 23, and the Eagles still pick him up. And probably the most explosive player in this draft falls to one of the most explosive teams from last year, and just the rich get richer with this selection for the Eagles.
Yeah, the Eagles are in a really nice position if they like Bijan Robinson, because there's only, aside from the Eagles, 1, 2, maybe 3 other teams who even have a chance at taking him in the first round. So they're almost at liberty to just move wherever they want backwards and still probably get the player they want. So, like you said, rich get richer.
Every time that someone came up, I looked at running back, and I found the reason for them not to take one.
Yeah.
Until I got to the Eagles, and I was like, oh yeah.
The only team that it really makes sense for right now, aside from maybe Dallas, that's the only other one.
Maybe
Arizona, but they have so many other needs. So.
Yeah, I could see it if they really wanted to go with an offensive playmaker. But
yeah, this makes too much sense for Philly.
I think he falls in this draft to the low 20s. And moving on, with the 24th overall pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Deonte Banks, the defensive back out of Maryland. And I believe that they go with defensive backfield help here. They traded C.J. Henderson and Jalen Ramsey in recent years, and they need to rebuild that defensive backfield. And they start here by teaming him up with Tyson Campbell, their latest starter on the defensive backfield.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, the Jaguars are in a pretty good position right now with how young they are and how talented a team they are. So it's pretty hard for them to miss with a pick.
Yeah, they kind of can pick the best player available.
Yeah.
And with the 25th overall pick, the New York Giants select Joey Porter Jr., the cornerback out of Penn State. And I believe they also go defensive backfield help here and start to rebuild that defensive backfield with one of the top defensive backs left and Bubba's favorite draft pick of the year.
Yeah, as I already mentioned, I love Joey Porter Jr., so I cross my fingers and hope that he slides in the draft to somewhere where the Vikings are. Granted, they don't move up and take Will Levis like they do in Callan's mock draft, but in real life, if the Vikings stay at 23 and Joey Porter can fall to them, bliss. That's exactly what I want.
He did go in this area, in my last draft, but that was when the Vikings couldn't trade.
Yeah.
So. And with the 26th overall pick, the Dallas Cowboys select Brian Bresee, the defensive lineman out of Clemson. And I have him going to the Cowboys still as I did in my last draft. And I believe that he'll fill an immediate need along that defensive line for the Dallas Cowboys. He's one of the top interior defensive linemen available, and he's one of the top run stuffers, and who the Dallas Cowboys really need to help with is that run defense.
Yeah, definitely. And something I like about Brian Bresee is he's just an amazing guy off the field. And so is DeMarcus Lawrence, who they have a defensive end right now. So you just get two really amazing people together who are also conveniently two really amazing football players. So I think that this is kind of best case scenario for Dallas is getting Brian Greasy.
And with the 27th overall pick, the Buffalo Bills select Jordan Addison, the wide receiver out of USC. And talk about the rich getting richer. One of the top wide receivers available falls to the Buffalo Bills, who get another weapon for Josh Allen and get the top wide receiver, in my eyes, the top wide receiver left. And he is one of the best route runners and one of the rawest prospects. And even though he doesn't have the big size of the other wide receivers, he still is one of the most dependable with his hands.
Yeah, picking in the last 5 or so picks like this has got to be so fun for these teams, because these are some of the best teams in the NFL at this point. So they just get to take whoever they like. They don't have any pressure to hit on a pick, really, which I guess I shouldn't say they don't have any, because they don't want to just pick a bust every year. They have so much less pressure to hit on a pick. So they can just, if they fall in love with the guy, take him, and no one's really going to be mad at you.
No. And it's another weapon for Josh Allen.
Exactly.
And with the 28th overall pick, the Cincinnati Bengals select Cam Smith, the defensive back out of South Carolina. And this latest riser in this draft has been Cam Smith, who went from a third-round pick to now a late first-round pick through the draft process. And he will immediately help the Cincinnati Bengals, who have signed defensive back help, but need as much defensive back help as possible, especially after getting toasted so many times in the Super Bowl, but in the AFC Championship
and in the
game.
Super Bowl against the Rams. They just constantly getting toasted. Yeah.
So they need to rebuild that defensive backfield and start with a young prospect here.
When the Bengals are on the clock, they should just write down the top 5 corners available, throw them in a hat, and pick a name out, because it doesn't really matter who they get. They have a pretty versatile defense and ever-changing defense. So just get yourself a corner, because that's what you need, Cincinnati.
They did it with offensive linemen last year, so they'll do it with defensive backs this year.
Exactly.
And with the 29th overall pick, the New Orleans Saints select Darnell Wright, the offensive lineman out of Tennessee. And I believe they still need to replace someone to replace Teron Armstead, who they lost in free agency last year. And this is someone who can step in and start right away and protect David Carr.
Exactly. Yeah, you just got Derek Carr. David Carr didn't come out of retirement out of the endless game. But you just got yourself Derek Carr, and you're paying him more money than I personally would have paid him. But hey, if you like him, you might as well go for it. So Go a lineman, get him some protection, and I really like Darnell Wright.
With the 30th overall pick, the Philadelphia Eagles select Jalen Hyatt, the wide receiver out of Tennessee, and they get their big speed guy out of Tennessee to come to the Philadelphia Eagles, who will have someone to take the top off that defense. Now, the team with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith.
Yeah, a few years back, they took a day 2 pick kind of risk on Quez Watkins, and Quez Watkins isn't bad by any means, but he's clearly one of those guys who are just fast. And he is fast. He has blazing speed, but you can just tell that he doesn't have all those other necessities for a receiver. But Jalen Hyatt is a guy who I think is a much better, well-rounded receiver and is still crazy fast. So maybe receiver is questionable for Philly, but like I said, these teams at the end of the draft, they can do whatever they want.
They can take the best player available, and that's another wide receiver who will go in this draft in the first round, I believe. And with the 31st and final pick, the Kansas City Chiefs select Will McDonald, the edge rusher out of Iowa State. And I believe that they go edge rusher here to team up with George Karlaftis. They lost Frank Clark in the offseason, and they need another edge rusher, and they hit on Karlaftis last year late in the draft, so why not try to hit again with another edge rusher prospect and a raw talent prospect.
Yeah, and I really like this pick, actually, because these guys complement each other really well. They both have really good size and strength, but while Karlaftis, you got that more power rusher straight through the tackle to the quarterback. Will McDonald has the size and strength, but he is still fast off that edge and has some incredible bend. So you can just sit there and rotate those guys and just let them completely be on those 2 tackles the entire game. It's a pretty good pick for the Chiefs, and not to sound like a broken record, but they can pretty much do whatever they want because they're picking here every year, and every year they usually get a pretty good player. So why not? Yep. So that was Callan's Mock Draft 2.0. Just some final reminders before the draft. The reason there is 31 picks instead of 32 picks in this year's draft is because the Miami Dolphins had to forfeit their first round pick after tampering with Tom Brady. Yep. And just in case you're curious, the 32nd overall pick is the Pittsburgh Steelers from the Chase Claypool trade that Callan mentioned way earlier before the start of his mock draft. So the Steelers technically sitting there with 2 first round picks of their own. So pretty interesting. So thank you so much for watching our final Eating W's mock draft. I hope you all enjoyed, and make sure to tune in for the start of the real NFL draft at, I believe it's 7 p.m. Central on April 29th. Callan and I will actually be in Kansas City for the draft, so it's pretty sweet.
April 27th.
Oh yeah, sorry, April 27th.
27th through the 29th, but the first round starts at 7 p.m. Central Time on Thursday, April 27th.
Correct. And so we'll try to get, Callan and I will actually be there. We'll try to get some video, but we might just be living in the moment. We'll see.
Definitely.
But there will be no true draft reaction video this year, just the mock drafts. But I hope you guys all enjoyed. I'm not sure when the next video will be, but until then, don't forget
to eat the W.